Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, Amma Rouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Ella Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up.
In the playwork world, play is a set of behaviours that are freely chosen, personally directed and intrinsically motivated.
That definition of play has blown mine and Ella's minds wide open. We are really happy to have Adele Cleaver on the show today to discuss all things play. Adele was born in Birmingham in the 1980s. She describes herself as a nomadic Brummie whose wanderlust has taken her to the likes of Lisbon, Accra, Tokyo, Salvador de Bahia, even Timbuktu. She now lives in Bournemouth on the south coast of England with her husband and 4-year-old daughter. She started writing in November 2019 through an art therapy course she enrolled on after her second miscarriage. She began reflecting on her varied career in playwork and how her professional experiences helped her overcome some of the challenges of parenthood. She found her approach to raising their child very different from their peers. She makes play her priority. Her book, Children Don't Dissolve in the Rain, is a playful manifesto about the importance of play, her daughter's play, and play in the community. Adele, your book is very current with respect to prioritising play, as you've told us that 2021 is the year that UK experts in child development are calling for a summer of play to help children recover from the upheaval of the pandemic. I think we all need recovery from the upheaval of the pandemic. With that in mind, can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Oh, my book, it's a labour of love. It's a very personal journey to me about my experiences of playwork before I was a parent, and then how the theory and practice that I picked up working with children over nearly 10 years influenced how I was with my child. And I just really felt I was quite different from my peers. I really prioritised my own play. I see play as self-care. So I carried on going to dance classes. I used to go to gigs and just take my baby along. And it was quite a big deal. You know, people were like, oh, you're bringing your baby. Okay, this is great, but different. Not so many people feel like they can take their baby out in the evening. And I didn't really think much of it at first. And it wasn't until she was 3 that I thought I should be writing about this and sharing my experience and documenting it somehow. And so that's how the book has come about.
Amazing. We also have a very exciting announcement. This book is epic. We have just begun reading it and absolutely loving it. And would you like to make your announcement, Adele?
I shall be giving a signed copy away in your very first PowerUp competition. Ooh la la.
Talk about summer of play. We have that opportunity for our listeners to enjoy delving into play with the amazing Adele Cleaver.
Thank you.
How do you enter? I hear you cry. Visit mine, Ella's or Adele's Instagram and look for our play-related posts. All details of how to enter are included in the caption. We're looking forward to reading your entries. Best of luck, beauties. So we know a little bit about what your book is about, and we know a little bit about why it came to be. But I guess what I want to touch on a bit more is the definition of play and this idea of play. Because for me, that's the first time I've heard that definition. And I think for Ella, it's probably the same.
So I didn't ever plan to work with children. But when I saw playworkers working with children, I thought, oh, yeah, I like this. I like this approach. Playworkers often take a step back. They let the children lead. There's no sense of obligation to teach or direct children when they're playing. And I think that's what makes us so different from other children's professionals, is that we are confident in trusting children to lead their own play, to lead their own learning, for their curiosities to come out, to discover, without an agenda, without a curriculum, without feeling like there has to be a product at the end of a session with us. We always talk about play as a process. It's a sort of never-ending process that we're really not looking for a product. So, when I talk to artists about play, I feel like artists are always creating to make something, to produce something, to share something. And so for me, that's not play.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Loads of artists are very playful. I've worked with loads of artists as play workers, but the sense of inside of us to make something at the end, it really takes away from the individualness of play. Like, play is unique for every single person. Every single child will play in a different way. And when we say, today we're going to make such and such, or we're going to play this game, we're straight away directing the play rather than letting the children lead. I always talk about the 16 play types, because that's a bit of playwork theory that doesn't get shared well beyond the playwork world, really. There's 16 different types of play. They were created or observed by a scientist in the 1990s called Bob Hughes.
Go Bob Hughes.
And for me, it's like, when you think of all the different ways that we can play, you think, oh, okay, we are actually playing all the time. Children are playing all the time. So I'm going to quickly list them for you.
Yes, please.
There's symbolic play, rough and tumble play, socio-dramatic play, social play, which is a little bit different from socio-dramatic. Social play has rules, so a lot of games come under social play, whereas socio-dramatic is more about drama and reenacting society. Communication play, one of my favourites, playing with words, learning languages, facial expressions. Dramatic play, deep play. A deep play is another one of my favourites. It's all about taking risks and confronting your fears. And that's something I really think children are missing out on massively at the moment, because we tend to control children so much and put our own fears on children.
Keep them safe.
Keeping them safe, wrapping them up in cotton wool, just not letting them be. Then we've got exploratory play, fantasy play, imaginative play, locomotor play, which is the one that we see most commonly in the world. Locomotor play is all about physicality, and we associate play with playgrounds. So children moving. And the kind of problem with fixed playgrounds is that they only really offer for locomotor play, and they forget about the other play types that in the playwork world we think are really, really important. And then to finish off, mastery play, which is all about being with nature and natural elements.
Probably my fave.
Object play, recapitulative play, and role play.
Can you say that the second to last one again?
Recapitulative is about reenacting history,
Cool.
understanding our roots, connecting with our ancestors. It's a very sort of very culturally different in different parts of the world, because children will reenact what the human experience is relative to their society. And these play types were created over like thousands of hours of observation of children all around the world. And this play theorist noticed that children play when given space and time to play freely. They all play in the same ways. And that's how we've kind of discovered that, or reinforced that, play is so intrinsic to humans. It's so innate in us. It's part of our systems. And at the moment, in the UK and other countries, we're really oppressing this very human part of our existence. Heavy stuff, guys.
I have a question. In terms of, like, we talk a lot about, you know, the kind of the art of being, and also the like learning to listen to our inner intuition. And I really feel that there's a connection between intuition and this state of play. I often refer to it as innocence, being in a state of innocence where you're kind of eyes open and you're seeing the world, and you know, it feels very connected to that state of being. Would you agree? Like, do you feel that you're more intuitive since you've been living, breathing play in your life?
Absolutely. I think I really connect with the intrinsic motivation element of the definition of play. And I think that we, as a whole, don't listen to ourselves enough. We like home educate is a really good example. People are very surprised when I say that I want to home educate our daughter because I want to prioritize play. And for me, there is this kind of burning anxiety inside of me to think that I could take her to school every morning and pick her up every afternoon and know that in those 6 hours or so that she's there, that she's not playing freely. When I know so deeply that it's so important to children to have that time. And speaking to a lot of teachers as well in like mainstream primary schools, they agree, but the system is just not designed for it at the moment. And I think the system has really kind of conditioned play out of us, particularly in our generation, because we don't play out for hours like we used to. You know, our parents' generation or previous generations, they came home for tea. That was it. Like the children just roamed. And we don't have that anymore. And so even, you know, decision makers and people of power, they probably played quite a lot as a child. If they're older, if they're like the generation above us, but have forgotten how important and how valuable that was to their growing. And that's kind of why I wrote the book, I think, is to really kind of share the knowledge that you can empower yourself through play. And when you stop to listen and really tune into that intrinsic motivation, what do I really feel like doing today? And most parents don't really feel like going to a children's centre because it's not a place that you feel comfortable when you're at your most vulnerable and sleep deprived, to go and sit with other strangers and sit and sing nursery rhymes in a circle with people, and that. But that's the offering at the moment. Baby groups, stay and play. It's, you know, it's a lot of chaos that is created for children just running free for 90 minutes or whatever. But I needed to run free in my own way as a parent, rather than prioritizing going to all these kind of baby-centric, child-centric spaces. Just didn't cut it for me when I was a new parent. And I think lots of people, if they'd really listened to themselves, they'd really tuned into that intrinsic motivation, they wouldn't have done either. Some might have, and fair play to you. But I think there's a space for new parents to feel like that they can do more for themselves and not be frowned upon or labelled as not looking after their children properly. I think we need to look after ourselves more.
Yeah, or feeling like they have to conform, perhaps.
Yeah, play is often quite nonconformist.
It makes me wonder if you have any tips for our listeners, any tips for adults, and how they can play more or kind of find their journey back into play, because I feel like it's something that we definitely lose as we get older, and especially in relation to what you were saying about maybe the older generations when they were younger, they were able to go out and play for hours and hours and hours. I know that when I was younger, I wasn't able to go and roam anywhere, but I was able to play outside a lot more freely than my nephews and nieces have in the generation below me. So it definitely does feel like that sense of play and our relationship and connection to it is being ebbed away more and more and more as we move through generations. So it'd be awesome if you could give our adult listeners some tips as to how they can invite play back into their lives.
Emma, you raised some really interesting points there, and you're absolutely right. Children aren't playing out as much as previous generations, and I think technology has a huge part to play in how children and adults play. We always say the best play comes from when we are bored, and we don't really have an excuse or a reason to be bored anymore, because whenever we feel like our attention is slipping, we reach for technology. And it's not just mobile phones. It was television 20 years ago. It's mobile phones now. So my number one tip is turn off your tech. Have some detox, digital detox from whatever it is that you spend your most time on. So my next tip would be, particularly for families and parents, is to not block so much time as busy time and just keep some free time for you at home. So we have lots of friends that live in different cities and towns from us, so we spend a lot of weekends traveling. But I've learned to have one weekend away and then at least 2 weekends at home. And in those weekends at home, we're not doing a lot of stuff. We're just taking the day as it comes. And that means our daughter wakes up, she plays, because we're not trying to get out of the house quickly. Yeah. It means that we potter about. And when we potter about, we play a lot more. We just listen to ourselves. It goes back to that intrinsic motivation of just what do we feel like doing and how do we feel like spending our time. And the more you give yourself that free time, we as humans end up playing, because that's what humans do. We play when we allow our minds to switch off and switch into a different realm, if you like. It feels like a realm.
I feel like you literally shot the arrow and it just went straight into the center of the bullseye for me, because I'm really looking at play and how current it is in my life and how present it is in my life. And it's not. And that's because a lot of my time is structured. And, recently I had a whole day where I said to my nephew, okay, we're going to spend this whole day together. I'm not going to put anything, I'm not doing anything in the morning, and I'm not going to put anything in the top or the tail of the day. And it's a day for us to do. Thank you. It's a day for us to do whatever we like. And I gave him lots of choices, and he chose the things he wanted to do with me. And it's true. We played so much more with such a sense of kind of openness and freedom, because I wasn't thinking, at 5 o'clock I've got to stop and go and do this thing. 7 o'clock I've got to go and teach. So this has to fit into this frame of time. And the quality of our time together was so different, and even the playfulness in it, the playfulness, the energy was really different. And so I think you're spot on with that, and I've experienced it recently. So the proof is in the pudding for sure.
And I just feel like a better person when I'm not trying to juggle work and play and parenthood, and I think there's so much like guilt surrounding what we're doing for our children or not doing for our children. And so if I know that one day I'm working, and I'm a freelancer, I have to work when I'm asked to work, I have to put my daughter's watching TV now whilst I'm recording this, just so I can have this time to record. It's not ideal, but it has to happen.
For sure.
But I don't beat myself up about it. I'm realistic, because I know that for the last 2 hours we've been sat on the floor together painting and drawing and doing things that she has asked to do. So it's all about balance. But I think at the moment we're living in a time of real imbalance. And that's what I found throughout my adulthood before I was a parent, was I just had totally prioritised work and this sense of proving myself professionally. And I totally forgot to play. And I was burnt out, like I wasn't in a good place at all. And it was until I realised that play is such a huge part of me. And when I say play, it's about each individual's response to play.
Beautiful.
Each individual's response to themselves and what they want to do with their time. So I talked about the different play types. When you recognise that there's all these different ways to play, you can see how play comes into your daily life, but maybe you don't recognise it as play.
Yes.
So being more mindful or aware of what you see as play, what feels like play to you as an individual, that really helps you realise, oh, actually, I am playing. Like if I'm cooking up a really nice meal that is just for me, and I haven't got to prove my culinary skills to anyone, and I'm enjoying adding ingredients in and tasting it as I go, and maybe having a little kitchen dance as I stir the pot, that's play. Like you're enjoying yourself, you're taking time out, you're not pressuring yourself to put a meal on the table. There's a product at the end of it, like there is a meal. But if you're doing it on your own terms for your own satisfaction, as an adult, I would consider that play. And that's why mud pies and kids in mud kitchens just goes on for hours and hours, because they're just like, I'm just going to add this ingredient and this ingredient. And they're not going to sit down and eat it at the end of the day and feel full, but they'll be full in themselves for what they've done with their time. And I think that's what we're missing in schools now, is with learning outcomes and objectives and a really structured day. Is like it's always about what you're achieving, what are you creating, what you showing that you can do at the end of the day. And that's where, like in childhood, play is lacking, because we just don't have this time where there's no expectation.
It's quite sad, isn't it?
To show anything. It is. Can I give you another tip that is it's kind of like I'm burning for at the moment for more people to do? There's in the UK and internationally, there's a movement for people to close their streets to traffic so communities can play out on their street. And I've been pushing for it in my local town for over a year, and it's just not happening because the highways part of the council have to agree to it. And it's a national priority in the UK. The Department for Transport wrote to all councils in, I think, 2019 and said, we need to prioritise play streets for public health. So this is a big current thing. There's an organisation in Bristol called Playing Out that offers support to individuals and professionals and councils to get people playing out. But once you create a space that is not... doesn't have to be a park, just creating a space on your doorstep where people can come together and play. It's a different kind of play from what you might do at home, but it just shows how easy it is for play to happen when the space and the time is dedicated to play. So there's some residents that open their street or close their street to traffic, open their street to play for like an hour a week or 2 hours a fortnight.
Oh, wow.
There's other people that do it just for a month. So it's kind of like a more regular street party. But on a community level or a neighbourhood level, that's the kind of play I'm really pushing for at the moment, especially since so many communities have come together more through the pandemic. There's a kind of a better network of neighbours. So if you're itching to play but you don't know how to do it, look up Playing Out. and they will give you some great advice.
I'm thinking, Adele, about me as an artist, and it's really resonating. I read something recently that actually we have our best ideas when we're bored. And I'm wondering if this is connected to play, but also this kind of pressure that we have as artists to create something and to make something that, you know, is a product at the end of the play. And how or if you have any suggestions around that as an artist, how do you kind of get over yourself as an artist so that you can get out of the way of yourself to play without that end result being the only focus or the sole focus? Because it's almost as if once we get the incredible play, then we do get an amazing end result. But how do we stop thinking about the end result so that we're truly playing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't think it's only relevant to artists. I think adults in general, even if they're working an office 9-to-5 job, still have this kind of barrier to playing. And I think a lot of it comes down to societal expectations. We live in a capitalist system, so productivity and products and services, goods and services, are always at the heart of our work, unfortunately. So you kind of have to kind of take a step back from those expectations and trust that your brain is capable of switching off and turning yourself into somebody that can play. I know a woman who has built a den at home, and so to get her headspace into her play zone, she's put like bed sheets up in her bedroom. She's got fairy lights in there, and that's her kind of place that she goes to think. I think my play space like that would just get bombarded by my 4-year-old. But you know, there's a big part of play that is about privacy and creating private spaces for children to play. And I think that can be translated to adults as well. We're so used to exposure and judgment, wondering what people are going to think of us or how we might be critiqued in our art, that having this kind of private play is also really crucial to feeling more comfortable with taking play out into our working lives. Strike a Light in Gloucester did it earlier this year. They put "Let Artists Be Artists." That was their remit.
I saw that, actually.
And I just thought, finally, like, because, you know, it's research and development. Play is research and development.
It makes me think of the process of applying for funding, and within that process, how much you have to satisfy a brief and how much there has to be a product and an end result. And it would be so amazing to have funding opportunities for artists to simply play.
Yeah.
Well, and this is it. It's the time pressures that you've then got connected to a production or a performance. And I think if artists can get this playful practice into their daily lives without it being connected to work, so they are dedicating time every day to play, then you're going to be more ready for the challenges around funding applications or working to other people's remits. I did the Artist's Way 18 months ago or so, and it's a brilliant tool. It's a brilliant course for getting into your own head and shutting off from expectations of the professional creative world. I'd really recommend even just the morning pages, which is a huge element of the Artist's Way. It's by Julia Cameron. It's a study book, but I did it as a study group. And I just thought, wow, I really connected to it because so much of what she was describing to me I perceived as play, and I just really resonated a lot with what she was saying about intuition, trusting yourself, dedicating time each day to listening to yourself. And I think that's what is sort of profoundly missing from a lot of people's lives, is this reflection. And a huge part of playwork is reflective practice as well. We dedicate time after every play session, or we're encouraged to as play workers. One of the playwork principles is all around reflective practice. So yeah, really tuning into yourself and your reactions to different situations.
It's making me think about pleasure as well as a connection here. Is play is very much connected to pleasure. Absolutely. And listening to what we want.
Yeah.
And when we listen to what we want, we are intuitive and we are in touch with ourselves.
And it's just so individual. That's the real challenge. You know, there's so much that is about following trends, or being in support groups with people that are going through similar challenges. And we spend a lot more time connected to other people now than probably other generations have. And I think with that, we've kind of forgotten to tune into ourselves so much and trust our own abilities so much. And I think that's in play. When children play, they are kept safe by adults, but adults are not interfering, they're not intervening, they're figuring things out for themselves. And I think that's really crucial. And I had that a lot as a child. I'm one of 4 children. I grew up in a house with a garden, and I just remember hours and hours by myself in our garden. And I realise now that that's just such a valuable part of my childhood, because I felt confident. Yeah. Confidence is a huge part of play, and a huge part of just creativity in general. I think it's like, if you feel confident in what you're doing, you create so much more. And it's, it's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, isn't there, in the art world? And I think actually we need to recognise confidence more as being a positive attribute, especially towards an individual's possibilities, and their possibilities in life. And I think that only comes through with children playing, because play builds so much resilience in us.
And if there was one message that you would like readers to take away from your book, what would that be, Adele?
A few people have been asking me this, and so many people ask me about the weather, because my book's called Children Don't Dissolve in the Rain. It's like, my book is not about people playing in the rain. But I'm guaranteed on a rainy day to have people send me messages of their children now playing in the rain. So I'm like, great, that's a start. I think my biggest message is about control of ourselves, control of our children, society's controlling us, decision makers controlling us. And when you can find ways to let go of the control, or disregard some of that control, or fully ignore it at some points, like I try to do, I think that's when we can all feel a bit more free. And when we feel a bit more free, that's when we're more inclined or more likely to play.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Mesma.
I am Amma Rouge. And we are PowerUp Podcast.